So, seeing the presence of a quorum, I am calling the Amherst Pelham Regional School Committee to order at 5:02 p.m. on June 28th, 2022. And we will take a quick roll call vote to see who's here. Start with Peter.
Peter present.
Allison.
Allison present.
Jennifer.
Jennifer present.
Margaret.
Margaret present.
Irv.
Irv present.
Sarah Bess.
Sarah Bess is here, present. Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties.
And me, Ben, also present. So we will start off with the approval of minutes from May 24th. Sorry. Did everybody have a chance to go over the minutes from May 24th? See a bunch of nods there. That's good. Does anybody have any edits or additions, corrections, these sorts of things? Oh,
Sorry,
yeah,
I have a question.
yeah, go ahead, and then I'll.
I'm looking at the board docs and it says June 9th. Minutes from June 9th.
Yep, that's.
Is that what we're doing? Oh,
Yeah,
sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, I was getting ready to point that out, that Maylene had actually pointed out that the error was that they're from the 9th, not the 24th. So the agenda listed wrong. So with that said, did everybody get a chance to go over the June 9th minutes? And did anybody have any edits, corrections, anything like that? All right, then I will entertain a motion from anybody. Peter, go ahead.
Move to approve the minutes of June 9th, 2022.
All right. Very second.
Second.
All right, moved by Peter, seconded by Margaret. No need for discussion. Or is there need for discussion? We can open it up for discussion. Looking around. Not seeing any jazz hands going up. All right, so we will take a roll call vote on that. Sarah Bess.
Sarah Bess, aye.
Irv.
Irv, aye.
Margaret.
Margaret, aye.
Jennifer.
Jennifer, I.
Allison.
Allison, aye.
Peter.
Peter, aye.
And me, Ben, I. Passes unanimously. Next part will be public comments, but we have no public comments. We will move on to the superintendent's update.
Thank you, and I'll try to be brief. We have summer school starting up, so thanks to the good folks working to get that set up. At the regional level, that is primarily focused in terms of our own programming on special education and high school credit recovery. We do have other programs in our buildings, like the town LSSC or Amherst Recreation, program. Saw those kids run around today, which was fun, as well as some other programs running in our schools. In terms of the end of the school year, our Summer Academy students planted flowers in the boxes outside Town Hall. So if you happen to be walking outside Town Hall, I ask you to notice them, and part of their horticultural and gardening classes, which has been a major focus the last few years over at Summit Academy. And it was kind of referenced in the local news, I believe, last week. We had a student, because of age, I'll just mention first name, named Mariah, who won the freshman 400-meter national championships last week at the New Balance outdoor track and field event in Philadelphia. We had other students competing, but congratulations to Mariah and all the student athletes who participated. I want to thank our facilities department. Some of the parking lot at the middle school was in a sorry state, and we worried actually, frankly, about safety and hubcaps and tires, and we're able to solve that problem. When we get the budget transfers later, you'll probably see that recognized in terms of facilities. So looking at the end of year funds, we tried to put funds to projects that really needed urgent attention, and that was certainly one of them. But getting it done and getting someone to come in and do it before June 30th was no small feat. So thanks to our facilities folks. Another facilities project going on, that's one, for those who've been on the region quite a while, you may remember that we have a oil tank that outside the middle school that has been it's underground, and it's been a long-term project to remove that oil tank. I think it's going on 3 years. It's a complex project, but the good news about taking it slow has been that we had the oil tested in the oil tank, and actually the oil is still usable, and it's a lot of oil. So since our regional buildings do not go off oil, but 2 of our elementary school buildings do, we're now in the process of taking the oil, extracting it, uh, bring it to the elementary schools so that it doesn't get ruined, and then when that all the oil's out, removing the oil tanker. So that'll be a project that we aim to finish, and we have a timeline for before students get back. It will be a little disruptive to our folks at the middle school, particularly on the gym, Amherst recreation side of the building, but it's really nice to see us moving forward with that project, and the bonus of having the oil tested, and frankly, we didn't know what to expect, but that it was absolutely usable, and it's a lot. I mean, it's old, but it's there no issues with it, and in terms of we'd love to get off fossil, but if we have sitting fossil, better to use that than buy new fossil, especially at this moment in time. So some complex between the districts how to sort out financially, but that's what we're working on. But in the end, a very serendipitous ending to a longstanding facilities challenge. But we look to have that completed on August 12th. On the Thursday before the last day of school, so I guess that would be the 16th, there was an event, as you found out through the artifacts document, a women of color affinity group, and that was our most successful of our affinity groups. And Ben was invited in his role as chair of the region, as was I, to their end of year event, which was in the auditorium at the middle school. And it was incredibly touching. And I think what stood out to me was the stories. People told stories of what the group meant and what it was like to be someone who identified as a female employee of color. We had some retired folks come back who were saying, when I was here, the room wouldn't have been this full. There wouldn't have been as many people there, and we still have lots of room to grow. That's why we're doing this. But it was a really meaningful event, and I felt quite honored to be invited to participate and to hand out awards and that sort of thing. So kudos to the organizers of the event. I know it was well appreciated by the 40 or 50 attendees who went on the second to last day of school when things are really busy. So I think it's worth noting that as well. And I want to thank Irv, Ben, and Jennifer for attending the high school graduation. It was a wonderful event at the Mullins Center. And despite some audio issues for people on the stage, there were no audio issues for people who are not on the stage, which is the most important thing. And just really want to thank the 3 of you for representing the committee at that special event. And that is my update for the evening.
Thank you. And before we open it up for discussions, I just want to say that the oil tank situation, it's like the only positive thing that I've found with our current inflation rates is that like we kind of save a bit there because of that. But yeah, that's also awesome. And I will take questions or comments from committee members. Anyone? I'm going to take the awkward silence as a key to move on there. So instead of giving the chair's update today, I'm going to intentionally cede my time to our negotiating team, I'll say, but that can come up in the next section, school committee announcements. So now, school committee announcements from school committee members and updates from subcommittees. Allison.
Yep. So the negotiating subcommittee met last week on Tuesday. I think it was Tuesday, maybe Wednesday. Sorry, with the APEA, and at that meeting, after that meeting, decided to submit a petition for mediation. And there's a statement that we released publicly, or Ben released it publicly on behalf of the Regional School Committee last Friday. The petition was submitted on Friday morning with the DLR. The statement is attached to the agenda, so that folks can read along, but I'll read it out loud. The Regional School Committee began bargaining with the 3 units of the Amherst Pelham Educators Association, or the APEA, representing the teachers, paraeducators, and clerical staff in interest-based bargaining style in December of last year. During that time, we were able to collaboratively identify areas of shared interest. However, in early February, the RC Regional School Committee and APEA could not reach consensus to continue in IBB and the negotiations moved to traditional bargaining to work towards contract ratification. Our groups have been meeting since March in traditional bargaining, which involves each party developing and presenting proposals and counterproposals until agreement is reached. In their original proposal, the APEA requested compensation increases that totaled over $3 million per year, or more than $2.4 million more than what the school districts had budgeted. Since then, our talks have focused on attempting to move toward a sustainable compromise solution that is more compatible with what our districts and our towns can afford. At our last meeting on June 22nd, the APEA presented a new proposal that included compensation increases totaling over $15 million per year, an increase of $12 million over their original proposal, and $14.4 million more than what is budgeted. The budgets passed by the districts already are planning to utilize over $1.3 million in one-time federal COVID funds, or ESSER grants, to support next year's budget and preserve existing programs and staff positions. The compensation increases that APEA is requesting just in the first year of the contract are $11 million more than the total remaining ESSER funds available to the districts, and $12.6 million more than the total average annual increase in tax revenues in Amherst, Leverett, Pelham, and Shutesbury combined. As a result, the Regional School Committee has decided to file a petition for mediation. And as noted, this was released by Ben on behalf of the school committee, and that petition for mediation was submitted on Friday. As a result, we canceled the meeting. You'll note that it's no longer posted, that we had planned for tomorrow evening with them.
Thank you. And are there any questions, comments, concerns? No. And I will look for others.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Thanks. Sorry, you're talking to me, Ben?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you to the negotiating teams. Sounds like a challenging situation. I guess I just had a question about, is it typical for the chair to put out a public statement on behalf of the school committee that we didn't have, that we weren't able to give input on? I mean, I suppose that's part of the chair's role. I just wanted to confirm, is this a standard practice that the school committee undertakes?
So the short answer would be yes. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or actually school committee announcements, subcommittee updates, anything? All right, so we'll move on to new and continuing business. We have a warrant report. Is that Irv?
There are quite a few.
Yeah.
So the question is, should I take the time to read them?
Yes, we should, yes. Yep.
All right. All right, so I, Irv Rhodes, authorized by my signature the payables in the amount of $755,409.47 on 6/20/2022. And I talked to Doug about this, but because some of them warrants come through without the form that I just read, but I'm going to just say it. I, Irv Rhodes, authorized by my signature to payables in the amount of, God, it's not here, $734,405.47. I, Irv Rhodes, authorized by my signature to the middle school student activities transfer in the amount of $6,774.14 on 6/22/22. I, Irv Rhodes, authorized by my signature for payables in the amount of $322,446.47 on the warrant dated 6/03/2022. Ira Rhodes authorized by my signature to payables in the amount of $322,446.47 for a warrant dated 6/03/2022. Ira Rhodes authorized by my signature to the high school scholarship warrant in the amount of $8,300 for the scholarship dated 6/7/22. Ira Rhodes authorized by my signature the amount of $635,832.42. Ira Rhodes authorized by my signature and revolving expenses of fund expenditures of $622,320 dated on 6/15/22. That's what it says. But that doesn't make sense. But anyway,
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Allison.
I'm going to change glasses.
Yeah, my understanding is that we have to also read the details of what the source of revenue was for, or where the expenses were coming from. Whether it's general revenue,
If I were,
or grants or other sources of funds. I
mean, that was not my understanding. Otherwise, I'd have went through the entire thing, which some of those are quite extensive in terms of where that money is coming from. And I did once print it out, and I never did it again. In terms of the extent of it. However, if you wish for that to be a part of our regular procedure, then I would suggest that I be, or anyone else in my position, be directed to do so.
maybe the forms that you're getting for the region are different than the ones that for another committee, because the ones in the other committee are just a one pager that lists the details. Yes, it's a lot of numbers, but
That's again,
if it's a legal requirement, then I'm cool with it. So
yeah, if I once did that, and I never did it again, because some of those will printouts go for at least 5 to 10 pages. And I don't think that the school committee, but if the school committee says, hey, read them all, I'd be more than happy to do that. But excuse me for a minute while I get another pair of glasses.
I was going to say it's probably worth talking to the business office about getting the same exact summary sheets. I think it might be helpful.
All right, so continuing. Ira Rhodes authorized by my signature the amount of for $684 and $684,623 dated on 4/6/17/2022. Ira Rhodes authorized by my signature expenses from the general fund of $510,676.55 with a revolving fund expenditures of $38,330.56. Ira Rhodes authorized by my signature to payables in the amount of $658,265.60 for a warrant dated on 5/20/2022. Ira Rhodes authorized by my signature to payables in the amount of $482,773.03 for the warrant dated 5/10/2022. General fund expenses of $470,596.58. And that one I do have attached to all the printout for, but that's would be more than ridiculous. Ira Rhodes authorized by my signature to the payables in amount of $187,026.81 for a warrant dated 4/21/2022. General fund expenditures of $128,510.53, with a revolving fund expenses of $20,246.03, and grant fund expenditures of $38,270.25. And that was dated 4/21/2022. Ira Rhodes authorized by my signatures to payables in amount of $148,943.77 for a warrant dated 4/22/2022. Ira Rhodes authorized by my signature the payables in amount of $187,026.81 for a warrant dated 4/21/2022, with the general fund expenditures of $128,510.53. Ira Rhodes authorized by my signature to the student activity transfer in amount of $20,800.84 for the scholarship dated 4/29/22. Ira Rhodes authorized by my signature to payables in the amount of $484,378.38 for the warrant dated 4/26/2022. General fund expenditures of $484,378.38. And that's it.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'll be more than happy to ship all these papers to everyone else.
Thank you. Doug, go ahead.
So since we had a moment, I looked up the law. It actually says that a regional school committee may designate one of its members for the purpose of signing payroll warrants and accounts payable warrants to allow for the release of checks provided. However, that the member shall make available to the board at its next meeting a record of such actions. This provision shall not limit the responsibility of each board member of the board in the event of a non-compliance with this section. So it really doesn't get specific about what we include in the report. I mean, obviously the dollar amount is critical. We have traditionally in various versions of this report try to break down the sources of funds. So I think it's in some ways my reading of that doesn't require it to specify those. I think it's helpful sometimes, but most of the expenditures are general fund, but there are times when we spend from grants in other forms. So again, we're happy to produce whatever documentation is helpful to the committee in getting an understanding of how we're spending the money as we spend it.
And I would, these warrants, I think that it would be really beneficial and educational for the entire committee to see them as they come through, because it's instructive as to how we are spending our money. And most people don't want to know how we're spending our money, but I certainly have, from my perspective and having to go through these, have gotten a really good understanding of where our money is spent and where it's going and how that relates to our budget priorities.
It'll definitely be helpful to have those in the packet each week. Jennifer, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I find it useful, if not critical, to have the things that Irv's going to read posted on board docs so that I can look along as he's reading, because I take in information visually as better than audio wise. So I don't know if Irv's supposed to upload them or Doug does, but like to have them uploaded on board docs so that we can read along when they're being read would be super helpful for me.
I think that's a good suggestion, and I think it would be very good, again, if all school committees were made privy to these documents.
Yep, agreed. All right, so we will move on to the superintendent's evaluation. So hopefully I don't stumble too much through this, but so as folks know, we have three major roles. Oh, Jennifer, did you have something? Oh, okay, all right, there we go. We have three major duties, right? One, create policy, two, to vote a budget, and then also to hire and evaluate the superintendent, which we do by means of an evaluation instrument that each of the school committee members fills out for the year. And so this is our presentation of ours this year. Is anybody able to share that, or I think I can actually. Oh, I don't have permission.
I'll open it up right now.
Sweet.
Should be all set.
Oh, good. All right. All right. So, can everybody see that? Wait a minute. Let me go back. Now that I can see you, can everybody see that? Good. I see head nods. Good. All right. So I'll just start off with the summary and kind of go a little bit section by section, just to offer us more time for discussion afterwards. So, the Amherst Pelham Regional School Committee presents Dr. Michael Morris with this summative evaluation of his performance as superintendent during the 2021 to 2022 school year. The evaluations completed by committee members are mostly supportive of the work that Dr. Morris and the district have done this past school year. His overall performance was rated exemplary by some or proficient by others, with one rating of needs improvement. Ratings from members on his established goals range from some progress to exceeded, with the majority falling in the met category. There are some quotes here. I'll jump ahead to the overall performance rating. Also, for folks at home, this is available on board docs in the written form, and it's far more substantive than I'm doing justice here. But so then to the overall performance rating, again, there was one person who evaluated as needs improvement, 3 as proficient, then 3 others as exemplary. While we have 9 committee members, one person was relatively new and did not complete this at all, and another, I suspect, had technical difficulties based on partial answers. Just wanted to throw that in there. And also, the section relating to impact on student learning, 3 members selected moderate and 4 selected high impact on student learning. And moving forward to the summary of ratings on goals.
Excuse me, Ben.
Okay.
It's Jennifer. Sorry, I don't. Are you sharing? Could you advance the pages
Yeah,
as you go?
I should probably do that. I was sitting there waiting for someone else to do it and just realized that that's me that I'm waiting to do it. So, right, so there we go. There's the overall performance rating that I was just speaking about. And the evaluation process. And so the summary of ratings on goals. The first, for develop plans to accept 6th grade students into ARMS standards, Roman numeral 1, E2, and 3A2. The ratings were some progress, 4 significant progress, 1 met, 1 exceeded. The next standard, continue progress on issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI at ARPS. Standard 2, Roman numeral 2, B1, and 4D1, 2, but some progress, and 5, but selected met. So continue the district's response to the pandemic, year 3, standard 2, Roman numeral 2A1, and 2A3. One person selected significant progress, 4 selected met, 2 selected exceeded. Sorry about that. Then provide effective FY23 budget planning and communication, standard 2E1. One person selected some progress, and then 3 met, 3 exceeded. Evaluate the efficacy of ARHS schedule change and district start times, standard 2-C-1. Sorry about that. One person selected significant progress, and the rest 6 selected met. The summary of ratings on standards. So standard 1, instructional leadership related to the 6th grade to middle school goals. One person selected needs improvement. 6 selected proficient with 1 exemplary. That was the only section with 8 members vote, or not voting, but evaluating. Standard 2, management and operations related to DEI, COVID relief funds, FY23 budget planning and communications, ARHS schedule change and district start time change. 1 person selected needs improvement. 2 selected proficient, 4 exemplary. And standard 3, family and community engagement related to COVID changes in the 6th grade to ARMS goals. 1 selected, needs improvement. And then 4 were proficient and 2 exceeded. Standard 4, professional culture related to DEI. The majority selected proficient with 3 exemplaries. And I will not make you listen to me read through all of the evaluator summary comments. Been tortured enough so far. So what I'm going to do before we open it up for complete discussions, I'm going to go person by person. I was going to ask somebody to stop sharing that, but that's me that I need to stop sharing. There we go. Good, Ben. And then ask for each person to give kind of a synopsis or a summary of their thoughts on the evaluation. I will start with, there's no bias involved here whatsoever, but start with the co-chair, Sarah Bess.
So you want me to give a synopsis of what I wrote in my evaluation or the summary of the evaluation?
Yeah, like your own summary of.
Oh, okay. So let me think. All right. I've worked with Dr. Morris for a couple years now through some crazy, crazy adventure times. And while we have not always had the same opinion on things, I think I said this last year and in other meetings before, I've always felt like my opinions were respected and it was easy to have open dialogue with him. And I greatly appreciate his vested interest in all of the matters. And I feel like the students are really at the heart of how Dr. Morris thinks about how everything, it's clear to me that the students are the heart of the school and the system. And I greatly appreciate that in Dr. Morris. And so, good job. And, I look forward to continue working with you.
Perfect. Thank you. And Margaret?
I appreciate, sorry, I just wasn't quite ready. As I think this is my finishing, either my 2nd or 3rd year on the region. And I think that, sorry, I got a dog here. Rosie, go out. She doesn't need to squeak while I'm talking. Sorry about that. She got a new toy. I appreciate all of the effort that Mike puts into the projects, that he reaches out for information and data. I feel like we really get good information about things that come up during the meetings. I think that these been 3 difficult years, budgets, COVID, and, you know, the student return this fall, I think was difficult, anticipated to be and was, and hopefully negotiated through that. I I don't know how I said this at the Pelham meeting last night. I don't know how Mike really handles the stress because this has to be an incredibly stressful position to be in. But he does seem to do that. He comes to the meetings prepared. He's professional. He's calm. And I think that that's of huge value when we're together and trying to interact. So I think it's been a pretty good year, all things considered, and I really appreciate everything you've done this year, Mike.
Thank you. Jennifer?
So this was my first time doing a performance review, and I was only here for a partial year. I maybe had a different take on the process than others in that I didn't really focus so much on whether I find Mike to be easy to work with or professional or whether I think he's like a good superintendent, but I just focused on the goals that were laid out by this committee last year and whether or not I felt that Mike had made progress or had achieved those goals. And that was mostly done by looking at the artifacts document and comparing them to the goals. I actually had a really hard time with like the goals and the elements and the standards. I had to like print everything out and then I like cut them out and tape them to pages, which is why maybe Margaret knows I spent a lot more time diving into these documents and all. There's a lot of verbiage than others did. So all this is to say, I think that some progress was made towards many of the goals, and I think that other goals, and the progress was more lacking. And I don't necessarily like blame the superintendent or think that he wasn't doing a good job, but like if our job is to evaluate, the superintendent's progress towards the goals that this committee set, I think some of them were met and some of them weren't. And I think sorry, I'm gonna look at the goals specifically to just try to pull out the ones. I guess specifically the goal 4 about budget planning. I feel that more. I felt that more proactive communication with community stakeholders is something that our district and the superintendent and the school committee can take. And I think that that's one of the things that's specifically called out in the goals. So that was one of the areas that I felt needed improvement. And I generally feel that our job is not necessarily always to commend the superintendent for the great job that he does. And he definitely does do a great job in many areas, but our position as the people who evaluate the superintendent should be to give him feedback on how he can improve, as well as feedback on the things that we think he's doing a good job at. But I would love to hear more from more members about ways that you think the superintendent can improve. Thank you.
Thank you. Irv?
One of the things that I was thinking about when I was going through the evaluation was the perspective that I have on Mike from knowing him and seeing him progress up the ladder in relationship of responsibilities from a classroom teacher to a principal. One of the things that sticks in my mind was one time I walked into Crocker Farm and Mike was on the floor interacting with a first grader. And that has always impressed me, how he was kid focused in terms of who he was. It's like, no one goes into education or to be a teacher unless you really like kids. you can't succeed in this unless you really like kids. Mike likes kids, and he's dedicated to them. I've watched him grow over the years into each of the positions he's occupied. And anyone who's ever been in a leadership position during hard and critical times, such as COVID, would look at Mike and his performance and say, Mike, well done. And that's what I would like to say, well done. Those were incredible times, and not very many leaders would come through those times in the position that you have come through, which has shown your tremendous command of this system, this school system. And I really, really want you to know that I really appreciate what you have done for this community in terms of our kids. And I really appreciate it. And so I really want to commend you on your job that you have done.
Thank you. Allison?
I was just scribbling more thoughts. So, it's an interesting conversation because I think, the purpose of the evaluation is absolutely to coach and help and support the superintendent and the district to know how to improve. Absolutely agree with that. And as a performance evaluation, we need to acknowledge the strengths and accomplishments of the superintendent. I mean, as a employee myself, it would be supremely demotivating to have my boss just completely tell me all the time the things that I'm falling short on and where I need to do better, and never once told me that they had confidence in my abilities in particular areas or celebrated my accomplishments. So I sort of take that and bring that into how I go to the superintendent evaluation. And this is the fourth one that I've done, and probably I wouldn't say the easiest because they're always a significant amount of effort to that I try to put into it to really reflect not just on the artifacts that that Mike presents to us, but also really thinking through each of the goals and sort of how they relate to the standards that we're supposed to evaluate the superintendent on. And I did look at the goals, and while I agree that maybe an individual bullet point here or there may not have been achieved on the totality of what we were looking for as a school committee when we wrote the goals, for the most part, I would say that he's met all of those goals. I think the one exception is in the sixth grade in the middle school because the decision was made instead of moving sixth grade in the fall of 22 to move the sixth grade in the fall of 23. And that decidedly then stretched out the planning time so that some of the things that we had put in as a bullet point on that particular goal, it didn't make sense to require those and have those be achieved in a single year, and rather be a multi-year goal. So I think absolutely, as I went through, and Mike, I'm sure as you've read through each of our individual comments, pointing out sort of the accomplishments and your strengths, and sort of suggestions on sort of building on those strengths and building in areas for improvement. I think one of the things that I've said repeatedly over the years is the thing that I truly appreciate, similar to what Sarah Beth said, is your collaborative and humble approach, frankly, that you bring. You bring tremendous expertise to the work that we're doing in particular projects. And at the same time, if presented with different opinions or different perspectives on things where you have expertise, you're open to hearing those and open to change and sort of building on that. Which makes the working relationship and the work of us as a district, so the school committee and the superintendent working together to improve the district, it makes that work so much more productive. Yes, pleasant, but really we want to be productive in the interest of our students. And I think that goes a long way. I think that's that for me across so many of the projects and the goals. I really appreciate that. I somebody else mentioned the calm, cool, collected approach, and I think the amount of work that you've undertaken this year. We didn't pull back on the goals for you this year, despite sort of saying that we wanted to go easy on you a little bit, given the third year of dealing with pandemic. We still had some pretty big meaty goals, and the fact that you made such good progress on so many of them, um, all the while juggling a shifting pandemic response and shifting funding and shifting needs and shifting conditions, I think is really a testament to your leadership, and sort of resilience in that. Right, we haven't missed a beat. I think we're pretty much we're 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 on track, and not sort of watering down our goals as a district, as we continue to um, work through the pandemic. I think the one area, we had the goal on budget. I think we made significant strides with our budget communication. The work that frankly Doug and his team did in pulling together the FAQ and the budget primer, and then working with the Four Towns meeting to sort of build that shared understanding of our budget, as well as getting us to an assessment method that everybody not only voted and approved, but there wasn't major drama and conflict once we got to that sort of solution proposal. And I think that's a tremendous accomplishment. I do agree that that's an area that we can still improve. And I see that as a shared responsibility between the school committee and Mike and his team, particularly in terms of how we present the numbers and how we talk about the budget, not just sort of the numbers of forums and materials that we make available. That's great. I think also using language and approaches that the community that isn't community members that aren't knee deep into this and don't have decades of experience working with municipal and regional school budgets, I think is something that we can sort of continue to sort of look through that lens as we look through the materials that we develop and present to the community about the budget, so that we've talked about in our committee many times about the difficulties that are coming our way. And I think that's going to become even more important, that we can talk in sort of terms that doesn't require people to have been working with budgets for decades to be able to understand the issues that we're confronting. But as I wrote in my comment, I've continued to enjoy the working with you, and I look forward to continuing to work with you and collaborate with you in the coming year. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And Peter.
Yeah, so first, I want to thank Ben and Sarah Best for putting this document together. I know from serving on other committees, it's a lot of work. I think it's a very fair summary of the evaluations of multiple members, some who came at it different ways. So I'm happy to vote on it as is, as a summative evaluation of the committee. I didn't, just to address the point of how we approach this, and I respect how other people want to approach it. I think that's unassailable in terms of member autonomy. The way I approach is that yes is essentially the way that DESE frames it in their guides, and there's a lot of information, by the way, online about DESE training and guidance on how to approach this if you want to geek out on that kind of stuff. But yeah, the goals drive it, but they're not exclusive of how we approach the ratings. And we also evaluate based on the context of expectation, right? So a couple of years ago, when COVID hit and upended all of the initial goals at the beginning of the year, we didn't just say, "Oh well, Dr. Morris, you're unsatisfactory this year," and right, and so that can be taken into consideration. I also think that it's our responsibility as a school committee to assess the job that we see, and to let the public know how we're seeing the job that's being done. We don't have total visibility, but we have a unique point of view, and to approach this with the idea that the superintendent has room for improvement in all of the areas of performance is not the same as an NI rating on the state's superintendent evaluation metric. right? I think it's okay to acknowledge that after 6 years, Dr. Morris has demonstrated consistently excellent performance. And it doesn't mean he doesn't get things wrong or we don't disagree with him on things. But my view, it doesn't mean he's a tremendous asset to this school district. And you don't have to look far geographically across the state or across the river to see that when the relationship between the superintendent and the community of the superintendent and school committee breaks down, it damages the school district for a long time. And so we're fortunate to have somebody who we've worked with for so long. We have such a good working relationship, and whose skills are such a good match to our district, and the unique demands of our district. And when I look at those skills across the whole spectrum of what we expect from a superintendent in terms of leadership, vision, communication, understanding of teaching. I mean, Dr. Morris he came up through the ranks, right, as a teacher and then a principal and then assistant superintendent, and now in his current position, and knowledge of budget, supporting staff. Most superintendents have some, fairly weak areas of those. And I don't think that Dr. Morris has any truly weak areas in those major aspects. I think he has demonstrated, and I think his very high evaluations over 6 years through 3 committees, over 100 different members, different evaluations, instances of an evaluation, have shown that he has a very high floor in these skill areas. But I guess the most important thing to me, the most impactful thing when I try and synthesize the whole performance is what Sarah Beth was talking about, and some others have touched on, is his kind-hearted and open-minded approach that he brings to everything. That it just emanates all of his work. Every discussion I have with him, when I'm bringing up constructive criticism, and by the way, in terms of like how we use this evaluation instrument, it should be noted that by contract, every member has the right and the opportunity to meet with the superintendent outside of this meeting and discuss the contents of their individual evaluation. So that's another opportunity, as well as over the course of the year, to offer constructive criticism. But getting back to the main point, in every topic I discuss with him, whether I'm saying, "Hey, wonderful job," or "Gosh, I really think that you were wrong on this," he's always centered in the well-being of children. And that's so important for an educational leader. It's we're not in the business of for-profit products here. We're nurturing young human beings, and so it takes someone with a big heart to do that. And because of that, he's always approaching everything in this continuous spirit of improvement, of spirit of continuous improvement, not only for himself but for the district. And when he approaches everything like that and wants to collaborate, therefore, right, and bring in the input and feedback from everyone else, it sets by example. And the fact that he's been able to do this for as long as he has in this district really provides a stability of leadership for these major changes. We shouldn't take for granted that this committee, as well as some other committees that we sit on, all the ARPS schools, are going through a lot of changes in addition to COVID, right? I want, building projects and 6th grade moves and curriculum changes and start times. It's a lot of change, and it's very difficult for a superintendent to come into a district and then just start changing things, right? You need to understand the lay of the land. You need to have the relationships with your staff, with your leadership in your buildings, with the community, and being able to provide and support consistent leadership, I think, is one of the most important things the school committee can do for a district, right? And that's what we want. We want to be able to support a leader who does that. And just the last kind of point, I wrote a lot, I won't repeat it all, but I think one of the most striking things I found in the artifacts document was the evaluation by our school leaders, our 21 or so principals, assistant principals, directors, and they rated them on a dozen different performance ratings. And the most common rating on every single aspect of performance was the highest rating: outstanding, above and beyond expectations. This is a feedback from his direct leaders, the anonymous feedback, right? And every single respondent gave him a commendable or outstanding rating on the performance aspects of accessible when I need support or guidance, and offers effective problem solving to support me. And I mean, what more could you ask for from an internal leader of schools, right? And so I have tremendous respect and appreciation for the superintendent's work. I think the community should know that we have an excellent superintendent. And I want to thank Dr. Morris for another outstanding year of service for our students and for our community.
Thank you. And so I think I have like a three-pronged approach to this, I guess. So I kind of did want to go over like my perspective on some of the goals, and there's a theme to this. I do not apologize for it, but so like one of the aspects that I looked at was the continued progress on issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI at ARPS. And I think Mike kind of alluded to this earlier, that not that I needed to attend an event where it was going to be, right there in my face, but like looking around the room at the event for women of color, specifically just women of color, and that's not the only group that we've improved in terms of diversity and inclusion, but we have absolutely made progress. And I would go so far as to say that we've made far more progress than like any other school system that I know about. Also, just want to preface that by saying that I don't know everything about every school system, but I do know a little bit about kind of the demographics of our surrounding area here. And I think we've done great things. And I think I don't know. I think you just have to give it up to Mike's leadership in that regard. Specifically, I think we've taken great strides. I know so putting my employee hat on for 2 seconds, just 2 seconds, that I know that the district looks a lot different than it did when I first came into the district. And as somebody who's a parent, a school committee member, and an employee, I feel like more welcome in that. I feel like we have diversity, and it's kind of showing. And so kind of want to give kudos for that. And when it came to the standards, standard 3, my thought is that we do as well as we ever have in terms of community outreach, but not this past school year, the year before. I think we started kind of moving towards something that I'd like to see us do more of. And I think Dr. Morris was very vocal about this, but the community outreach, right? Like I don't necessarily want to say that we could do better community outreach. I think we do very good at soliciting input from our stakeholders. I just think we can do it different, right? Like we can add a little bit of nuance there. We can have some diversity within our outreach as well, right? Like, and I think specifically when we have the whole COVID, when it first became a pandemic, right? We had the like the listening in Q&A sessions here at the apartment complexes, that sort of stuff, the active outreach, and I think that kind of it humanizes the issues a little bit more, and I kind of feel like we get more real input, right? Like sometimes people speak emotively, and that's important to get those perspectives. And then overall, I would say I can't think of a superintendent in this area. I can't think of a superintendent period that I would rather work with, right? I feel like Mike is easy to work with. I feel like he takes criticism better than I do, and I like to think that I do that well. Can pretty much tell me anything. And also in terms of like disagreements, I think I interact better with Mike in terms of situations where we don't agree than anyone else, because it's like he almost wants to hear the different opinion. So I can definitely appreciate that. I mean, that's how you get progress, right? It's not about doing everything right. It's about learning from where you might not necessarily have done right in everyone's eyes, right? And that's the other part that I think everyone here should probably be able to relate to with when it comes to Dr. Morris, is that not everybody is always going to think that everything you do is right. Like as school committee members, we probably should understand that. If you don't understand that, that's fine, baby steps. But I think the way that he handles himself in these situations is not just respectable. I think it's commendable. So it's kind of why I rated him the way I did on this evaluation. And would this be a proper time to entertain a motion? We go ahead and do that. We got motions. Peter?
I move to approve the superintendent's summative evaluation for the 2021-2022 school year as presented.
Second.
Oh,
Oh,
moved
sorry.
that's moved by Peter, seconded by Jennifer. Did you have a comment, Allison, or were you going to second it?
No, I had a comment discussion. I'm not sure in the past if we've included partial evaluations. It was helpful when you introduced this topic to explain, because I count every time I was reviewing the memo, I only ever saw seven dots in any of the tables, and yet the memo said that 8 people had completed them. So I'm not going to move that we edit it, but I just want to sort of, it's something that I think we should consider in the future, sort of to what extent we include partial evaluations. Because even with the summary comments, I only saw 7 or 6. I can't remember how many, but it wasn't 8. So I wasn't sure how. I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying. I just think it's something that we should talk about for the next one. I don't think it's worth changing for this one.
Okay, I absolutely agree. That was kind of like a stumbling block for me, like going through, like, do I completely throw out somebody for not having all of the sections? And it also did seem like it was like a technical glitch, maybe. But yeah, we definitely should have that kind of written in stone by the next go around. Go ahead, Jennifer.
I have 2 questions, and I guess one is sort of along those lines. Ben, are all of the verbatim comments in this report, or are there some verbatim comments that are not in this report?
No, they're definitely not all in here, right?
Okay, and then I guess my follow-up question is, does Mike get to see those verbatim comments, or does he only get to see the report? He does.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like the raw data.
And then I guess my next question or suggestion is that actually in the report on page 4, when it lists the DEI goal, there's one bullet point that's just missing from the description. I don't think it was missing from the survey. I think this is just a transcription error, but on goal number 2, the continue progress on issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, the bullet point, the second one on the goals document, which is provide meaningful professional development on topics of DEI throughout the school year, is just not listed in the report. Again, I think it's listed on the goals document. I think it was in the survey, just like, could it be added to the report just so there's consistency? I don't know if that means we have
totally
to.
a transcription issue.
Yeah,
I apologize.
It happens. I don't know if we need to modify the motion, but it's just, just to make it consistent.
Peter, go ahead.
Accept that as a friendly amendment.
Perfect. Noted. All right, so moved by Peter, seconded by Jennifer. If there's no further discussion, I'll go ahead and take a roll call vote here.
Peter, aye.
Peter, Allison?
Allison, aye.
Irv?
Irv, aye.
Jennifer?
Jennifer, aye.
Margaret?
Margaret, aye.
Sarah Bess?
Sarah Bess, aye.
And me, Ben, aye. The motion passes unanimously. And so Mike, go ahead.
Thank you. If I could just make a brief comment and a note of appreciation for all of the feedback, whether it was warm or cool feedback, it is how I get better, both knowing what the committee feels like is going well as knowing what the committee feels like are next steps for me. So I really want to appreciate that. And I also want to appreciate, I think someone referenced, I think Peter might have referenced conversations that individual committee members have on issues before they're, big votes or when they have questions. And that really is helpful. So I do want to I've said this, I think most years, just encourage folks to reach out to me, because I learn a lot about the different perspectives from the committee members in those conversations. And I do feel like those conversations, as well as all the public meetings and those pieces, really do help me and my team get better and know what's on school committee minds. And, you all have different roles than I do, and my team does. The other thing I want to say is just to acknowledge the tremendous work of the full team. There's very little in this world that I do independently, very, very little. And so, I just think we're a unique district in that, we've got people like Doreen and Faye, Marta, a number of central office staff who have been in similar roles for now quite a few years together. And we talk about it often that, that consistency helps us work on goals that may look like one-year goals, but really, like the DEI goal, that's been a goal for 30 years, if not more, in this district, right? And so, I just appreciate the stability of our central leadership team, as well as new people when they bring that, as well as the school committee. Not everyone has a school committee members who, when they have a concern, they call and chat about it to talk it out. And I learned from that, but it also really has that open door of communication. And I felt that from each and every school committee member. So I just want to appreciate the time and effort, because I know it's a lot of artifacts. I apologize that we put that many out, but I think it's important for our district to share what we've done and where we're headed. And I appreciate all the time that you put into your roles as school committee members and as well as this evaluative piece. So just want to share my gratitude and appreciation. And I look forward to working with you all next year, as well as the rest of the evening tonight, I should say.
Thank you. All right, so we'll move on to budget transfer. Sorry about that. Yep. Is that a Mike deal or a Doug deal, or a Doug and Mike?
While Doug's bringing up the document, I'll cue it up verbally for Doug, if that's okay with Doug. So at the end of the year, very typically, we look at cost centers and we're balancing out the end of the year spending. It is, as you've seen in the first, second, and third quarter budget updates, there are some cost centers where we were in particularly good shape, and there were some cost centers where we needed some additional expenses to be paid. We're also balancing this with our use of ESSER funds. And so this year, there's an additional variable to that I appreciate Doug and Shannon and the work that they are doing. So, none of this should be super surprising, special ed being the big one. You saw that was going over throughout the year, coming back after 13 months of not being in-person school and the impact it had on special education. This isn't for us particularly surprising, but we are looking in future years so that we mitigate that and that cost doesn't continue moving forward. So I'll turn it over to Doug, but I think managing this fiscal year has been a challenge. And so there's probably a couple more budget transfers than in past years in June, but the balance, what we want at the end of the year is looking pretty good to us. So Doug, you want to take it from there?
Sure. Thank you, Mike. Just a couple other points I'll make just to orient you to the document just a little bit. Those that are in the top part of the grid there are budget areas that had available resources left and can be supporting these other areas that have run above what we expected to have happen relative to what we had budgeted, more than a year ago. And so, the opportunity to make some other choices relative to our budget is also included in here. I made it mention a little bit of being able to provide some additional support to our food services and our athletics programs. There are other areas. Those are two specific revolving funds that we have some support for here. That allows us to rebuild our balances a little bit. Some of the things that generate revenue for both of those areas are not as have not had the opportunities that they've had in years past. Pandemic limited some of the gate receipts, for example, in our athletic programs. The ever-changing and evolving food service picture was a difficult one this year. And so again, some supply chain issues cost the district more money to do certain things. And so to provide a little more support for that is helpful. And we have the fortunate opportunity to do that with some areas that have come in a little less than expected. And so, there are also some decisions here where we're able to not lean on some grant funds and preserve those for future use. I think in special education, we have been able to do that a little bit. So we have the resources available to help. That's not to diminish the comments the superintendent made as well, as far as need being higher than it has been. And so the need for support there, but we're also in a position to use our appropriated funds because we have them available to us to support that area of the budget. So I think with that, I'll pause and see if there are any questions from any committee members about the particular transfers we're requesting here. We're not quite done with the budget, so these are nice sort of roundish numbers, and that's with intent because we're still working through the last few days of the fiscal year. But nonetheless, this will support some areas we know need some support. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Jennifer, go ahead.
So the decrease column is where the money's drawing from and increase is where the money's going to,
That's correct.
right? What is in control accounts?
So control accounts there are a number of things in control accounts, but one of the things we have in control accounts is money we set aside for negotiations. So we had a 1-year agreement with our unions relative to our APEA units, which are teachers, clerical, and our paraprofessionals. We had a 1-year agreement. Funding that was in our control accounts was set aside for the purpose of funding the agreement for that 1-year agreement. For a couple of other unions, we finished our negotiation for the current year and 2 more years during this fiscal year, and so there were money set aside in that area for that as well to help support those areas of the budget that those hit. And so that's the big chunk of money in those areas. There are other things that we have for merit awards and things like that we set aside, maternity leaves, changes in where people sit in the salaries. So if they, like in teachers, if you go from a master's to a master's 30, that's a change in what they call lane. We have some money set aside for that. So we have some of these control accounts to balance, some potential, but not always strictly expected, expenses, and we can use it to help support the other areas.
Any other questions? All right. Keep it moving then.
I'm sorry, can I make one more other comment just to add to what Doug was saying about control accounts? It's also where we put every year funds for projected enrollment increases. So we have an enrollment in the spring, and then what we know is that things change, right? We have either we have more kids and we need to add sections, or we have students who come in whose to meet their needs requires a larger financial commitment. And so frankly, this is an atypical year. Our enrollment at the Amherst level kind of bounced back a little more than at the regional level. I know it's another committee, but just since we're doing 2 tonight, I'll preview that for some of you. And the other thing that was unusual is we didn't see a large influx of students, which we assumed we would, that required additional funding from that perspective. So, more typically we're at the control accounts is in the increase section at the end of the year. This is a very, very atypical year that way. And so I just wanted to note that because I think it is important in context that in addition to what Dr. Slaughter said, it's our ability to manage unanticipated costs that come up throughout the year. And knock on wood, this year went smoother than any year I could remember in terms of unanticipated costs that way. So that, I'm very accustomed to seeing this on the increase end. I think Doug is as well in the past, but I just want to note that this is, I would love to count on this, but history tells me that would be a dangerous precedent to be expecting to occur again. Sorry about that. There is a motion at the bottom and a vote language. I just wanted to note that.
Yep. And with that note, I will look at that. Allison, go ahead.
I move to modify the FY22 operating budget by making budget transfers between cost centers as shown in the Finance Director's memo dated June 27, 2022.
Second.
Moved by Allison, seconded by Margaret. I'll take a roll call vote. Peter?
Peter, aye.
Allison?
Allison, aye.
Irv?
Irv, aye.
Jennifer?
Jennifer, I.
Margaret?
Margaret, aye.
And Sarah Bess?
Sarah Beth, aye.
And B. Ben, aye. The motion passes unanimously. On to policy update. I'll look to Peter for that, I believe.
Yeah, I'll just briefly intro it and then I'll hand it off to Dr. Morris. So this is an update to our policy JKAA, students, physical restraint and behavior support. This was brought to the policy subcommittee by Deb with a proposed change. Policy subcommittee supported bringing it to the full committee to consider the change in a possible vote, provided the district personnel were here to answer questions. So that's all I have from the policy subcommittee point of view. The document highlights what the change is. And so I turn it over to Dr. Morris, I guess.
Yeah, and I'll start, and Faye is mostly, I think, here if there's questions. Faye, is it okay if I just jump in, Faye? So the short story is we've had a policy on restraint. In a typical DESE review, they noted that some of the aspects of the policy that weren't in the policy, they were in our procedures and protocols, they believe should be in the policy. So this isn't involving a change of practice. This is more of a clerical exercise in moving some things that were in our procedures already to the policy level. You know, our legal counsel felt like this was our old policy was sufficient, and DESE now believes it is not sufficient, and they would like to move some aspects up there. But again, this isn't a change in practice. It's not a change in anything other than where this lands in terms of policy procedure. We're happy to answer any questions. If this is a topic that requires, you know, more thorough discussion, we can certainly kind of fall. But DESE did want us to move with, you know, reasonable pace to get this issue resolved, so we can then communicate back to DESE that we've completed the task they set up for us. Faye, did that capture everything? Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I think so. I think one thing I would just add is that DESE acknowledged that in our procedures and our training documents that we distribute to all staff and go over annually, that the piece that they wanted added to the policy was there in the other documents. It's just that this group that did our monitoring this time felt like they'd like to see this one piece about prone restraint be in the policy as well.
Jennifer?
Hey, could you explain what prone restraint is and when it's used?
Sure. So prone restraint would be at a time where you would have a student, when you would need to move to physical restraint and all other restraints were already found to be ineffective. It's when a student would be face down and in a hold that was the staff members who would be using that would be certified and trained. There's also other requirements for documentation to say that that wouldn't be something that would be contraindicated for that student. And I just might say that it is not a restraint that, gosh, in my years of being here, that I know that we have ever utilized. So there are several methods of restraint that are prohibited under Massachusetts general law: mechanical restraint, medication restraint, and seclusion restraint. And prone restraint is not exclusively prohibited, but there are a number of requirements if and when that would ever be utilized. So I think you would very, very, very rarely see it used in a public school environment.
Thank you. You have any other questions? All right. Thank you to the policy subcommittee for your continued work, and thank you for Faye for coming out and explaining the details for us there. Much appreciated. And thank you for everything you do for our district as well.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the really quick response to this. DESE does not require us to have our corrective action plan completed very quickly. However, this was something that was really, as Mike said, more of a clerical kind of piece, moving kind of literally kind of a couple sentences from our procedures into the policy. And it seemed easy enough to get underway so that we could start next school year with having that, you know, hopefully at a place where the school committee felt like they could approve it. But thank you for your support.
Thank you. Next, we have retreat planning. Oh, sorry, Peter, go ahead.
Well, so if we're going to update the policy, we would probably want to do the motion and vote and whatnot.
I was just testing. I'll entertain a motion.
Just a point of order. My understanding is this is a first read. And the agenda doesn't say that we're voting on it. So I'm not sure we can vote tonight.
This is true. Peter, go ahead.
So, I mean, it's a good point. So my understanding is that there's nothing Mass General Law or open meeting law that prevents us from voting a change. But it is correctly noted that our protocol for typical policy updates, if we're going to change it substantively, is just say first read and then second read and then vote. And then if we're going to update a policy at the first discussion, we would publish it as possible vote. So that's correct. As I'm looking at the board docs posting of this item.
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that's speaking for Faye, I think that's fine. You know, I think we can explain to Desi that, you know, at the next meeting it'll be voted in typical process. There's not the level of urgency to get voted tonight, but we wanted to at least get the conversation started and see if there was any questions. So the next time it could be voted and we can let our Desi colleagues know that we're good to go on that aspect.
Duly noted. We will push that to our next, well, 2 items down, we can discuss that, I guess. All right, thank you. And now we'll move to retreat planning. I'm not sure what I have to add to that other than like we kind of need a date and a place. Other folks have thoughts? Mike, go ahead.
So what I'm happy to do is to send a doodle poll. Typically, for those who haven't been on the committee has met in August, and the retreat is a policy on retreat, and it's a very different kind of meeting. There's no votes taken, so this would not be what we just talked about. Would not be talked about at the retreat. But I've found it, from my role, incredibly helpful in setting the stage for the year. Talking about some broad goals and laying out some of the goals, both for the committee, but also for myself and us combined. So, you know, I would really like to do that. I'm happy to host at the high school library if we'd like to do it that way. We also in the past have used Amherst College as well. So if the committee would like, I'm happy to send out a doodle poll, you know, probably through Sasha to find a date, and then I can work with Ben on a location. But you know, last year we did it in person, and I imagine, you know, my preference, you know, would be that if possible we could do that in person. It's hard to do retreat work virtually in my experience, but I'm open to other thoughts and feedback.
Yeah. Jennifer, go ahead.
Is this an all-day affair? No. And when I hear retreat, I always think it's an all-day thing. How long are they usually?
Historically, they've been about 2.5 hours. You know, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but my recollection is it's in the neighborhood of a typical school committee meeting.
And is it a public meeting?
It is.
Oh, it is. That's right.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I assume that the doodle poll will go out soonish, and we can get to actual planning. Go ahead, Allison.
Yeah, it is a public meeting per policy, though it's not a regular meeting, so there's no public comment or the like, but there's an agenda and the public is welcome to attend. One of the thing that we did last year was a self-evaluation, and I'm not sure, because we have so many new members now, it might be helpful or useful for us to use something similar like that to prepare for the retreat. That was also how we we solicited agenda topics or things that we wanted to go through. So I just wanted to throw that suggestion out there as a way of getting broad input on agenda setting for that, as well as just getting feedback on ourselves from our new committee. And I had another thought, but now I've completely forgotten it. But that's it.
Irv, go ahead.
I agree with Allison. Self-evaluation would be really, really good. It's a means of us looking inward at ourselves and how we've operated, etc. It would just be a good thing to include as a part of that retreat.
And Allison, did your hand go back up or did it stay up?
Yeah, I remembered my thought.
All right.
It was related to the self-evaluation. There was conversation in the MASC listserv as well, and a lot of folks were really super interested in the fact that we had done one. I just throw that out there, not that we should do it because everybody was interested in what we'd done, but there seems to be a movement across school committees across the state to do more of this sort of self-evaluation.
Irv?
I was trying to take my hand down. I think I've been successful.
Fair. Any other comments on or thoughts on retreat planning? All right, we'll move ahead to future agenda planning. Do you have is the document shareable? Or?
I don't think it goes beyond tonight.
Oh, right, solid point.
But I think for me, if the retreat is the next meeting, then that'll be a lot of my opinion is that can be a lot of the work for the retreat is to think about topics and map out some things and how we want to focus in the timeline of it. So I think planning the retreat would be the thing that we want to do a good job of to set up the year well in terms of future topics.
I concur. Anybody else have any thoughts? Can we move along? All right, we will accept gifts. I have board docs open. I only have the printout. Are there gifts? Go ahead, Peter.
I move to accept the following gifts from Catherine Richardson and Jarrett Mann, number 419, to support biliteracy scholarship in the amount of $85. From Lynn and Bruce Mann, Fidelity Charitable number 1232126 to support biliteracy scholarship in the amount of $500. And from Anonymous, check number 3388 to support community building awards, two at $250 for $500 for a grand total of $1,085.
Second.
Who won that one? We'll go for
I
Jennifer.
don't know.
Moved by Peter, seconded by Jennifer. And we'll go roll call vote. Sarah Bess?
Sarah Bess, aye.
Irv?
Irv, aye.
Peter?
Peter, aye.
Allison?
Wrong screen. Allison, aye.
Margaret?
Margaret, aye.
Jennifer?
Jennifer, aye.
Oh, and me, Ben, aye. All right, the motion passes unanimously. Okay, and next, the regional school committee will now Maylene, go ahead.
Hello. I don't know if y'all can see me. Hello. I just wanted to say, share an appreciation to y'all's work this past year while we're still on the regional meeting and I still have people from the committees on here. As someone who went through the ARP system and someone who studied education policy and someone who currently works in higher ed, it's been really interesting listening to these meetings for the past year. I genuinely geek out, even though you don't see or hear me. And I will also be doing the recorder position again next year. So yeah, I look forward to hearing the conversations y'all have in the future year. Okay, back to turning this off. Okay.
Thank you, and to throw it right back at you. Thank you for being so on point this past year. Like that, it's weird. I don't know. Maybe it's weird to say that I actually like looking through minutes and they're laid out so well.
I enjoy writing them a little bit, even though it takes time.
Much appreciated, though. Peter?
Just a quick note before we adjourn. I'm guessing some people have connected to this meeting anticipating the Amherst School Committee meeting, but we should note that that's a different Google Meet link.
And with that, all right, so the regional school committee will now consider entering executive session pursuant to general law, chapter 30A, section 21A, paragraph 2, to conduct collective bargaining sessions And 21A, Section 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body. And the chair so declares, and I do declare. Section A2 is to meet with the, APA and hear the grievance. Section A3 is for the committee to deliberate how to respond to the grievance and with the intention of returning to open session. I will take a motion or entertain a motion. Allison?
I actually have a question. I don't
Yeah.
believe we're returning to open session. Is that-
That's true. We're going to be in a whole different meeting. So with no intention of returning to open session.
So moved or seconded?
So roll call vote real quick. Jennifer?
Jennifer, I.
Mike, go ahead.
Just there's another reason to go into open executive session as well. There's multiple reasons, at least as I'm looking at board docs, there's a second paragraph there. And so since you're not returning to open meeting, I think from a process perspective, the committee can consider them separately or they can consider them together, but I don't want people to not be able to hear the second reason, because then from open meeting law, you all can talk about the second thing.
Yes, I'm going to go ahead and read the second section of that too, because we would technically be in. All right, so the Regional School Committee will now consider entering executive session in accordance with open meeting law, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, to conduct collective bargaining sessions and to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation of APEA and APAA if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares, and I do declare, and to approve minutes in accordance with open meeting law, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 22, with no intention of returning to open session. So now I will take a second.
Second.
And roll call vote. Jennifer?
Jennifer, I.
Margaret?
Margaret, I.
Irv?
Irv, aye.
Sarah Bess?
Sarah Best, aye.
Allison?
Allison, I.
Peter?
Peter, I.
And me, Ben, I. The motion passes unanimously, and we are now entering into executive session.